The dust had settled into every corner of the old ranch house, coating the photographs on the mantel like a second skin. Thomas hadn't touched them in years. 10 years, to be exact. 10 years since Margaret had taken her last breath in the bedroom upstairs, her hand growing cold in his as the sun rose over the Montana hills. He'd been 38 then, young enough to start over, people said. But Thomas had buried that possibility along with his wife. The ranch kept him busy during the daylight hours. Cattle didn't care about your grief. Fences needed mending whether your heart was whole or shattered, but the nights were different. The nights were an ocean of silence that threatened to drown him. He'd learned to navigate them alone, moving through the dark house like a ghost haunting his own life, heating canned soup on the stove, falling asleep in front of the television because the bed upstairs felt too vast, too empty, too full of memories he couldn't bear to disturb. Margaret's family had stopped calling after the first few years. Her parents had passed. Her brother moved to Seattle and sent Christmas cards that Thomas never opened. There had been a sister too, younger, but she'd been traveling abroad when Margaret died, and by the time she returned for the funeral, Thomas had already built walls so high that no one could scale them. He remembered her vaguely, standing at the graveside in a black dress, tears streaming down a face that looked heartbreakingly like Margaret's, but younger, softer somehow. The knock came on a Tuesday evening in late autumn. Thomas almost didn't answer. No one came out here anymore. The ranch was 40 minutes from town, at the end of a dirt road that most people had forgotten existed. But the knocking persisted, gentle but insistent, and finally he set down his coffee and walked to the door. She stood on his porch with a suitcase at her feet and eyes that held the same amber flecks as Margaret's for a moment. Thomas couldn't breathe. Then she spoke, and her voice was different, lighter than Margaret's had been, with a tremor of uncertainty. "Thomas, I'm Claire, Margaret's sister. I don't know if you remember me," he remembered. But the girl he'd met briefly at family gatherings had become a woman, her face lined with its own stories of loss and survival. "I know this is unexpected," she continued, her words tumbling out quickly as if she feared he'd close the door before she finished. "I had nowhere else to go. I lost my job in Denver, my apartment, everything. I've been living in my car for 3 weeks. Margaret once told me that if I ever needed anything, you were the kindest man she knew. I'm so sorry to impose, but I just need a few days to figure things out." Thomas should have said no. Every instinct told him to protect his solitude, his carefully constructed isolation. But standing there, looking at a face that carried echoes of the woman he'd loved, he found different words emerging. "Come in." The first days were awkward. Claire moved quietly through the house, trying not to disturb the dust or the silence. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. She cleaned the kitchen one morning while Thomas was out with the cattle. He came home to find the windows open, fresh air pushing out a decade of staleness. She cooked dinner that night, nothing fancy, just pot roast with vegetables, but it was the first real meal Thomas had eaten at his own table in years. They talked in fragments at first. She told him about her years teaching English in South Korea, about the relationship that had brought her back to the States only to fall apart, about feeling like she'd lost her footing and didn't know how to stand up again. He listened, and in listening, found himself speaking too. About the ranch, about Margaret, about the weight of missing someone so much that you forget how to be a whole person. "She loved you so much," Claire said one evening, her voice soft. "I was only 19 when she married you, but I remember thinking I'd never seen two people fit together so perfectly. After she died, I wanted to reach out, but you seemed so far away. I thought maybe I'd just make it worse. I didn't know how to let anyone in," Thomas admitted. "I still don't, really. Maybe we're both learning," Claire said. The days became weeks. Claire found work at the library in town, but she stayed at the ranch, paying rent over Thomas's protests, cooking meals that they shared at the old kitchen table. She brought laughter back into rooms that had forgotten the sound. She organized the photos on the mantel, dusting them carefully, telling Thomas that hiding from Margaret's memory wasn't the same as honoring it. One night, 6 weeks after she'd arrived, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the hills. The silence between them was comfortable now, familiar. "I need to tell you something," Claire said. "Margaret asked me to watch out for you right before she died." I was on a video call from Korea, and she made me promise. She said you'd try to disappear, but you were too good a man to lose to grief. I failed that promise for 10 years, Thomas. I let my own life fall apart instead of keeping it. But maybe I needed to break before I could be here now. Thomas felt tears on his face for the first time in a decade. She knew me so well. She did. And she'd want you to keep living. Really living. As darkness fell over the ranch, Thomas realized that loneliness wasn't destiny. Sometimes salvation arrives in unexpected forms, wearing a familiar face, carrying her own broken pieces, ready to help you gather yours. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like possibility.